All right, welcome to North Idaho Experience. In today's episode, Dave and I sit down with Scott Coleman. He's a former cop, and he is now working for the Children's Advocacy Center and Safe Passage up here in North Idaho. They are a fantastic organization that is a nonprofit, and they assist domestic violence victims and abuse victims here in North Idaho in a bunch of different counties. They are an excellent resource for people out there that are having some hard times and going through some difficult things. So hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. We did touch on some difficult subjects, so if you got kids around, just keep that in mind. And if you, they are always looking for donations, of course. So the link will be in the show notes if you guys are open to it, helping support such a great organization here in North Idaho. All right, enjoy. Rolling. Look at that.
We're hot.
We're hot.
It's man, it's amazing to see how many guys leave those jobs hurt. I've said it before. I'm so happy that I got out of a career after 17 years, and I don't have major medical issues.
Just on the inside, bro.
Yeah,
in the little heart. I was trying to reach your heart. But
That's true.
Oh yeah, reach your heart. I feel like it should be the military, where 20 years is a career.
Yeah.
I know there are a ton of guys up here that I know that did 30 years, some 40 years in law enforcement. It breaks the body down quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've
got I'm part of a CHP retirees group up here, and I'm the youngest by far. But all the older guys have a lot of medical issues
for sure.
Well, it's just people don't know what people. I mean, even being a teacher. I mean, it doesn't matter just what job it is.
Sure.
There's so many things. And
Yep.
I used to giggle every time I go into Home Depot because they'd go, "Are you military?" I said, "No, former law enforcement." They're like, "Oh, sorry."
That
I go,
count.
"Hey, do me a favor. Call 911 right now and let me know who shows up."
Yeah.
Don't even get me going on that. There's not VA. Nothing against vets. We love the vets, but
Vets are amazing.
they get the VA bennies. They get the loans. I'm like, God dang, there's really nothing like, you see like a law enforcement program with a lender and they get like $500 off. I'm like, oh, that's great. Thank you.
You're like, that's
you know
cool.
what?
Super
But
helpful.
honestly, those men and
They're free
women too,
Oakleys.
the military. I mean, I think law enforcement deserves it too. But those guys, I mean, you think of how much they get paid when they go in, and people say like, oh, well, you don't have any bills, but those guys get treated like crap with a lot of stuff, right?
yeah.
Like, I mean, it is, and you see what happens to so many of them when they come back. It's just a mess.
And being deployed for extended periods of time. Like, we never had to deal with that as
Yeah.
No, you did as a firefighter.
I was a fireman. I was deployed for 8 days, came home for 1.
Yeah, that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
I
That's all right. I
got
hung out with good dudes, and I had a blast.
I got to sleep in my bed every night or day, either one. But
We had a firefighter that worked in Garden Grove, and he worked out a deal where he would do, I want to say 6 days at the station.
Yeah.
And then he would fly home to Idaho for the rest of the month.
We got tons of guys up
There
here.
are
was
a
like,
shocking
you can do
number of
that?
guys up here that do that.
Yep.
Wow.
Hundreds, I believe.
That's how I found North Idaho. There's a buddy that flies back and forth. He still does it.
LA City has just tons of guys that
Yep.
live out of state. There's a guy that lives out of country. I can't remember where it was, some weird country. And I was like, damn.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Just
Pretty awesome.
stack those days and just fly it. I'm like, I mean, you're going to be gone for 8 days in a row anyway. Why not?
Yeah.
Just, I don't know. That's crazy.
Well, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah. Much
Thanks for
appreciated.
having me.
Yeah. We were
Happy to be here.
looking forward to talking to you about all of this. We're going to talk about Safe Passage. I got it right. And
Perfect.
Children's Advocacy Center.
It's hard to say when I answer the phone. It's
My
like,
goodness. Yeah.
So I like touching on this subject, especially in Idaho, because a lot of these blue states talk about the fact that red states don't have a heart and they don't do anything for people. And this is actually something that is so critical, I think, in a lot of communities. And it's not necessarily something that is just a freebie, right? I mean, you don't have to. There's ways to get taken care of, but it's not something that the goal is to get people set back up, right?
Mm-hmm.
To get them free from whatever it is that they were dealing with and move on to be prosperous, find a life, do whatever they have to do, and just get away from the damage or anything that happened to them. So this is really cool that we have stuff like this here.
definitely.
And I dealt with it a lot when I was in law enforcement. There was always a resource out there when I needed to get to somebody.
Yeah, it's really cool. And we are one of the only community-based, safe. So I guess to start, the CAC, the Children's Advocacy Center, I'll try not to use too many acronyms because that gets a little onerous, but we are a function of Safe Passage. And so Safe Passage has been in our community since like 1970 as a domestic violence DV. We have a full-time domestic violence shelter advocates, court advocacy. We help folks out with protection orders if they need them, and then working their way through the legal system, working with the advocates that they have at Coeur d'Alene PD, Post Falls PD. So we all kind of work together, but it's a community-based, basically we're a nonprofit. And so the Children's Advocacy Center was founded in 2014 in our community, and they decided at the time to put it underneath Safe Passage. So we're technically a nonprofit, but we work really closely with all the different agencies and the sexual assault response team. Our team will go out to the hospital anytime there's a victim of sexual assault in the community. And then we specifically specialize in helping abused children. So whatever type of abuse it is, it's awful. I won't get too into the details because it's really disturbing. But, primarily we deal with sexual abuse of children. And we'll do forensic interviews and provide advocacy for those kids throughout the court process. Obviously, you're thinking of a kid who's been sexually abused by someone, and then they have to go to court and testify in front of that person. It's going to be really, really challenging and really traumatic for that kid.
Yeah.
I learned that Idaho, the accused has the right to efface the accuser.
Yes.
Which is extremely disturbing.
Yes.
When you have a child that has to testify in that
Right.
situation.
Right. Yeah. I think it's called the Confrontation Clause, and I'm not an attorney. But yeah, the Confrontation Clause is kind of the challenge. In my mind, it would make sense that if you do a forensic interview with a child, you could use that as evidence in
Right.
court. However, there are rare exceptions where they can use that as evidence in court and present it in court during a prosecution. But for the most part, that kid has to go to court and testify.
It's rough. And you know what? That the whole process, right? You've seen it happen and played out in different communities where something happens to a child or a spouse or anything else like that. The process going through it is very, very uncomfortable. And
Yes.
I'll tell you, as a former cop up here, that was one of the hardest things for me, because having groups like you that can actually advocate to where you're not interested necessarily in investigating, other than a forensic interview that's going to advocate for that person. I found it very difficult in law enforcement, especially from the initial reports. The questions that you have to ask somebody that may be a victim.
Yes.
Right? Because there's
Yep.
questions that I have to rule out whether or not, it appears that we have probable cause, whether or not this person could be lying, or whether or not their story adds up. So I think a lot of times law enforcement can really not feel like an advocate for these people, because you end up having to ask them some questions that can be very intrusive.
For sure.
And make them feel like they need to prove themselves.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
somebody like you is not trying to get somebody to prove themselves. You're simply trying to advocate for their best, for their best welfare.
Right. And that's, we try really hard to be that neutral fact finder, because law enforcement, working as a cop, you've got again, ideally, if you're a good cop, you're neutral. You're trying to figure out what actually happened. You're not just trying to put a case on somebody.
But those questions that come with it sometimes are.
Yeah. And they're hard.
Yeah.
They're hard. So, and then we also, me personally, I provide minimal facts training to a lot of our cops in the area to teach them how to be a little more trauma informed when they're talking to kids.
Right.
How not to ask leading questions, things like that. And framing those questions in a good way so it's not like offensive to the victim. So like for instance, the old adage is like, if you're questioning a woman who was sexually assaulted, asking her like, well, what were you wearing?
Oh man.
Right? Like that's gonna be
gonna
kind of
elicit,
offensive and almost like victim.
And it doesn't
blame.
matter.
Yeah.
Let's just be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
And if you need to know from an evidentiary standpoint, like explain that to the victim. Hey, this might sound weird, but I need to know what you were wearing at the time so I can go look at the video surveillance.
Absolutely.
Or collect those clothing as evidence, right? So it's just the way of framing it. And I think when I teach cops about this, it's like just slow things down a little bit, because I know from my experience being a cop, you're just busy. Like you're going call to call to call to call. And the goal is to get just the facts, ma'am, get it out to your partners, and close that call out and get on to the next thing. In cases like this is time to slow down and get information carefully.
Yeah, and we all know there's a certain segment of law enforcement that does not have the best bedside manner. So
Right.
maybe not the best
don't
person
say.
for those interviews. Yeah. Does your background in law enforcement help with what you're doing now? And was that a requirement to get the job that you have, or were you just drawn to this?
It's not a requirement to get the job I have, but I think it definitely helps. Typically, most people, there are 7 children's advocacy centers in the state. I'm the only director that's a man and the only director that's a former cop. So I'm kind of different in that way. I would say I'm definitely a very empathetic person, which was always challenging for me as a cop. So I'm definitely drawn to helping victims and doing that kind of work. But I think being a cop and understanding how a cop thinks and the way that they operate creates a lot of rapport when I'm working with them to get the best outcomes on cases.
You know, it's great to use.
Doesn't hurt that you're like 7 feet tall either.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah.
Which can be a challenge talking to people too.
No,
Kids,
it
right?
can.
Kids for
Yeah.
sure, but not
No,
cops.
I have to get down on the ground with kids a lot
Oh, yeah.
and do all that. I'll show you guys this.
You know, it's funny you're pulling that out when you talked about empathy. Is, you know, I always talk to people about having empathy because a lot of people will confuse it with sympathy, right? Because sympathy means that you've been through that.
Right.
And you understand exactly what they're going through, which some people have that.
Sure.
But being able to understand what empathy is and still, because some people don't want to be, I'm not sympathetic. You can still be empathetic and
Sure.
say, hey, I don't know what you're going through, but I can understand how that would be difficult.
Yes.
Right?
Definitely.
Did you read this?
Yes.
So you
I
carry
am
these. Who gets
6
these
foot-
cards?
My wife.
Let me read this real
My
quick.
wife got those for me.
Yes, I am tall. I am 6'7" and 6'8" with shoes.
Uh-huh.
No, I'm not kidding. Yes, that is tall. No, I do not play basketball, but if you push me, I will lie and tell you I play for the Tijuana Zonkies.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, seeing the tops of everyone's heads is weird. Yes, the weather up here is nice. This has been a great conversation.
I love it.
These are
Amazing.
phenomenal.
I love it. Yeah. I handed one out just before I came over here because I get asked about 14 times a day, how tall are you?
Yeah, pretty damn tall.
That's great.
Wow, you're tall.
Oh, we got to stand him next to Big John. See who's. I think you must have. You got a couple inches on Big John. I think.
You said you're 6'7"?
Yeah.
Yeah,
John's
he's taller than
6'5".
John.
Wow, good lord. Yeah, our Sasquatch suit would fit you, just for the record.
I have a double XL tall Sasquatch outfit, but
What?
I'll
You have
try
your
yours
own.
on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Ours is pretty legit.
Yeah.
You telling me Sasquatch could have a friend in one of our videos?
We could do dual squatches,
My
man.
gosh. Yep. All right, coming. Stay tuned.
I'm in.
That's great.
I love it. I love that kind of shit.
We now have a sign writer, so some Sasquatch has his own listings now when we're selling homes.
Nice.
We reserve it for the perfect properties, like off grid, out in the
Sure.
middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And Squatch has a couple listings out there.
And
It's
we're
pretty cool.
convinced that he's licensed, so we're not really dealing with any issues with that, I'm pretty sure.
And who's going to call him on it if he's not? You know?
Good luck finding him.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Get a warrant. You can never find him.
That's awesome.
Send him a letter.
So, talk to us. What areas do you cover? Is it just North Idaho Panhandle, certain counties, or where's your jurisdiction?
So primarily we deal with Kootenai County. That's our primary core function. And then we do provide services to Shoshone, Benawa, sometimes Bonner County, but there is a CAC at Lilybrook CAC. It's actually a family justice center in Sandpoint. And then for a long time, we were providing services all the way down to Lewiston and past there. We would go down there and do interviews at the FBI field office down there. They did just open up their own CAC in that area, which is amazing. So they'll work with the Nez Perce tribe. We work with Coeur d'Alene tribe, just pretty much all of North Idaho, depending, but mostly core Kootenai County.
And when you say Kootenai County or these other areas, is it based off of where the victim or individual lives, or where potentially the crime happened, or okay,
it could be a little bit of both. So
Okay.
most of the time it's the crime occurred in Kootenai County, so we're investigating we're not investigating, but providing services to the investigators. And then we will do cases for victims that were victimized in another state, and then we're doing a courtesy interview for law enforcement in that area.
You said you're doing oh my gosh, I blanked out. The investigation you did this morning, or the interview.
Yes.
Forensic interview.
Yep.
Is that always in conjunction with law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay.
It can be either law enforcement or the Department of Health and Welfare, but primarily they're working together in most of these cases. So the referral has to come from one or the other. We don't do private forensic interviews for family court and things like that.
And so when you were in law enforcement, you were Garden Grove PD.
Yep.
And you were a detective down there when you left. Did you do child crimes back then as well?
No, I didn't specialize in child crimes. I worked quite a few in patrol, and I remember one of the most impactful cases that I worked as a patrol cop was a 16-year-old girl. It was Christmas Day, and her family was a Jehovah's Witness, and as a cop on Christmas Day, you're thinking, oh, it can't be that bad, right? But there was another double homicide, the other one.
Oh,
anyway, this particular Christmas, this family showed up right at the beginning of my swing shift, and this 16-year-old girl disclosed that she had been sexually abused by her stepdad for the past 8 years.
Oh my gosh.
And so I called our sex crimes investigator who's opening presents with his kids at home, and he goes, bro, can you just handle it? And he's like, you're a smart guy. And I go, yeah, thanks. I'll take care of it. So, yeah. And so I at the time I look back on it, did I do everything right? No. But, I ended up doing an interview with her myself, and I had just gone to interview in interrogation school. So I thought I knew everything. And then we put together, we called them in California, a cold call. Here they call them a slime call. And we did that. And then we went out and arrested the guy, brought him back to the station. I interviewed him for 3 hours. He copped out to everything. And so I worked the case from soup to nuts over 15 hours. And the guy died in prison. So for me, looking back on that, that was one of the most impactful cases that I ever worked as a cop. And so when this job opportunity came up, when I moved up here, I thought this could be something I could really get on board with. And I feel like the work you do has to be meaningful. It has to be important to you. And this kind of work, helping kids is
huge.
You don't get a truer victim than that.
Right. Right. You got a question?
I do.
Go ahead. I'll remember mine.
You will?
Yeah.
No, all right. I won't.
I already forgot.
I was talking to you before we got on here. You said you work with an individual with Coeur d'Alene as well. I won't name him, but
yeah.
Obviously these types of crimes, they weigh on you.
For sure.
I think of an example where I was actually, I dealt with one of these where there was inappropriate pictures sent of this lady's underage daughter, and she had photos as evidence, and she's like, hey, she's been sending photos of this 30-year-old man, and she goes, I want to send them to you. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, don't do that.
I go, I know I'm investigating this right now, but I want that to go to because truthfully, what I'm getting at is that this weighs on you mentally, right? And it has a tendency to twist minds sometimes. When you see stuff like that, I thought, oh my gosh, this lady's about to send me nude photos of her 14-year-old daughter. I don't want to see these. This is something I'm like, let me give you the investigator's number, right? I don't want it. I don't want it in my email. I don't want any of it, right?
Right.
But then what that did was it made me realize that, law enforcement, yourself included, and I'll get to my question on that too, is that I have a tendency to pray so much for law enforcement that are in these positions because I don't think departments provide enough mental health training, counseling, and just days off and a release from that job, or even cycling through these jobs to where you don't get so far into it. Because when you look at the photos and hear the stories, you think of when we call evidence, right? And you see something on a piece of paper that says this happened. There was an officer behind that he or she had to view this crime. And these crimes are horrific. And to have to look at that, to provide an affidavit to say, hey, this is what happened, it can absolutely make you not sleep at night. So
for sure.
My question to you, and for we have a lot of law enforcement that watches, as somebody that investigates these and does these forensic interviews and hears these stories from people that people want to tell you, how do you and your group deal with basically the tank getting too full on so many terrible stories and being able to keep your mental health straight?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we're very fortunate in the work that we do. We don't have to see those pictures. We hear the stories. Like this morning, I had to listen to an awful story from a boy. And it's, that's one thing, but I tell the gals I work with, we don't have to smell it. We don't have to see it, and you don't go home with it on your clothes. Whereas when you're a cop, you do. And there's, in my opinion, just in my my own personal constitution, for me, hearing the stories, like I can deal with it. I have ways of, I try to stay active and exercise and pray and walk and hang out with my kid and focus on good things and have healthy thought patterns. I try to give my staff a lot of scheduling flexibility to spend time with their families. If we don't have work that we're doing specifically, I'm like, go home, go for a walk, go to the gym, do something. Okay. So I like to provide them with a lot of like healthy outlets and scheduling flexibility. Like I said, we're very fortunate. So I think the longevity of my position, because I'm not doing forensic interviews all the time, I'm helping out because there's a staff member that's out on maternity leave. Oh, you're going
to... Twice I've done it now.
He's going to get you.
Austin's going to hit me.
So I think so I don't have to do as much of it. And then the staff members that do, we try to spread the load a little bit. But for the cops, like, it just sucks. There's... it's called ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children, and there's task forces in every jurisdiction. They work these cases with the FBI and Secret Service and all that stuff, and they're looking for these creepers online because that's the primary source. Yeah. And they have to look at they used to call it child pornography, but now we call it CSAM, child sexual abuse material. Because pornography indicates that somebody consented to it at some point. CSAM doesn't. These guys and gals have to look at it. And I couldn't do it. I would not be able to do that, but somebody has to. So I guess, I don't know if that's a roundabout answer, but
it's good to know that you're aware of it and you take care of your staff because, like I said, my biggest issue with it is, the individual we're talking about he's been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
And that stuff makes me nervous when people are stuck in a position for a long time because I see how there's a big pat on the back. Hey, thanks. You're doing a great job. It's like, you know what? Honest to God, if it was worked into a PD budget to say, you know what? You only work 3 days a week. And by the way, after X amount of cases, we're sending you off duty and we're sending you to counseling once a month.
For sure.
And we're, whatever it is, because everybody sees that bad stuff. I think of I think of like what happened down at U of I a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And I heard people telling me stories of like, oh, did you hear this? And I'm like, man, you don't realize all that story. There's somebody that had to go touch that, measure it, take photos of it. I'm like, the impact that it has psychologically. I mean, and we know, I guarantee you know how to suppress. I know he does, and I know I do.
And I can't remember anything.
Oh my gosh, there's so many things that my wife doesn't know. A lot of whiskey. Yeah. And then people are like, well, you shouldn't be a cop, you're an alcoholic. Be like, I wasn't an alcoholic until I got this job.
Yeah.
It's tough.
I'm thankful as a trooper. I really never had to deal with that. We did some, we'd have like, kids taken into custody out of DUI stuff, but that was really it. A good friend of mine, my old graveyard partner, was a reserve deputy at Shoshone County, and Shoshone County is very underfunded. They're great men and women there, but they don't have the staffing they need, and they still have the crime, right?
They have a lot of these cases.
And he was working those cases. He'd call me, and thankfully, he had his own way of dealing with it. But he'd call me a couple times and start telling me about a case, and I'm like, bro, I love you, but I don't want this in my head.
Yep.
I'm going to stop you right there. And, it's like, I don't want those images in my head. I've done a pretty good job of avoiding it. Even dealing with kids in car crashes, right? I've got that image in my head, and I don't, that's horrible enough. But to see the innocence taken up of a small child is like, I don't know, man. I'm super thankful men and women do that job. But gosh, I think you're right. Like there needs to be, the trade-off is, the guys and gals that have been doing it a long time have great experience and they're very good at it, and you don't want to have to retrain somebody, but dang.
And see, that's the exact reason why I say counseling and things like that are so important, because it's not that you did anything wrong. Luckily, I tell everybody, I'm like, this is my counseling session. When he and I get in a car for an hour, we start talking about stuff, and by the end of it, I come home and I'm like, God, I feel good.
Yeah.
I was able to just get some stuff out, talk about things before. But you think about and I know who you're talking about, but you think about him trying to talk to you. It is. Sometimes you just need to tell people because it's so impactful that you almost need to just let it off your shoulders. And it is hard because I don't want to hear that stuff either.
No, and it's like you don't want to put that on your spouse by any means. No. So you have to, and he does have a therapist he talks to about those kind of things. So it's like, it's good. And I knew that. Otherwise, I would have let him.
Is therapy good?
Let him vent. You should try it.
I've still never been.
I've been trying to get him forever.
I know.
Yeah, you do.
One of these days.
I've tried. He keeps making fun of me. He's like, that's exactly what somebody would say that needs therapy.
That needs therapy.
I'm like, well, I don't trust him. I'm not going. Yeah. Anyways.
We were talking about injuries in your career in law enforcement. And I think we've all had the backs and knees and shoulders and necks and headaches and whatever. I feel like if you're an active cop and you work in an active jurisdiction or even in an inactive jurisdiction, like you're going to have injuries. And I teach a class for local cops on trauma-informed policing through the Department of Health and Welfare and this Crisis Intervention Training Academy, CIT. And one of the things I talk about is we used to have this there's this picture in our locker room of all these yoked out CDC parolees. And it said, they worked out today, did you?
I had that same
Right?
picture in my office,
Yeah.
dude. I love
Yeah.
that one. Yeah.
I had it in my locker. And I know so many cops that take such good care of themselves physically because they know that you could get killed. It's a dangerous job. So you gotta stay physically fit. But you're far more likely to have a psychological injury being a cop than you are to have a physical injury. And I tell this to like newer cops and these folks that I help train. For me, like when it comes to that kind of thing, I didn't know I was sunburned until I got home from the beach. In other words, until I had time off to sit around and think when I injured my shoulder. And a lot of the things I'd seen and heard and smelled and tasted, they all came back to me. And I'm like, whoa. And there's so many cops that don't take care of themselves psychologically, whether that's therapy or whether it's some kind of spiritual practice or having a friend or a mentor to talk to. There's a lot of guys who just like stuff it down. They don't have friend groups or they only talk to other cops. And so you get in this sort of like echo chamber of doom. So I always encourage them, like, take care of yourself mentally as best you can. And if it gets too bad, like, it's time to go.
Yeah.
It's time to go.
They have to, because you see how many times cops and firemen go through divorces, especially, right?
All the time.
You can suppress stuff while you're in the job. You have that outlet. You're not home all the time, right? You have all these things, and people will grow accustomed to that lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And the next thing you know, retirement happens. And now this different person comes home and is home every single day.
Yep.
And it is so hard, man. I can't even. It was an adjustment for us when I went from fire to law enforcement, because in fire I'd be gone for 8 days sometimes. Like, my wife didn't see me for 8 days, 10 days sometimes. Sometimes if we're on a strike team, a couple weeks. When I became a cop, that was an adjustment because I came home every day after 10 hours and 40 minutes. She's like, whoa. I slept in my bed every night. She's like, this is weird, right? But now it's like, I'm home every day.
Yep.
My wife sees me every day, and that's an adjustment.
You literally have to relearn to live together.
Yes.
When I got off of graveyards and I started actually sleeping in my bed at night with my wife, she's like, this is so weird. She's like, I kind of got used to just sleeping by myself, and it's nice. She can spread out in the king size bed.
Nobody's snoring.
You almost need to ask the question, like, do you like me?
Yeah.
Like,
are we cool?
I mean, we've had to make adjustments for that.
Yeah, it's an adjustment. And I think when I cycled out of law enforcement, I drove through here on a road trip, 15 years ago now, and I tucked it away in the back of my head like, this would be a beautiful place to live. And and during COVID, I hit up my wife and I said, hey, want to go visit Coeur d'Alene? I've always kind of wanted to live there. She's like, sure. So we came up here for the weekend. And
just takes one visit, man.
Did you live up here during that time? When did you move
I
up?
moved up here December of 2020.
Okay. So
we literally moved here at almost the exact same time, and we got here in the same way.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, that year of 2020, especially when everything was going down with the pandemic and all that stuff, this was the best place to live. I tell people, I'm like, I wish we could go back. I remember going to Silverwood, and it was 25% capacity. You're
like, this is great.
We went there for 2 hours because we go on every ride 5 times, and the kids were like, we're done. Like, I don't want to do anymore. Everybody, we could go to the beach. We could go out to eat. There was nobody anywhere. We're like, this is incredible.
Yeah. And then all these Californians showed
Good
up.
living, yeah.
Ruined everything.
That
it
blows
was
my mind
just-
that we literally moved here in the same month.
That's pretty cool.
And we kind of got outside.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, that's strange.
I was living in Long Beach at the time, and we were having, obviously, the pandemic situation going on, but also the riots.
Yeah.
There were all these riots going on, and they were spray painting, all cops are bastards on the Rite Aid behind our house, and all the
some are, but not all. Come on.
Yeah, I mean a lot of them. Anyway, so yeah, they had boarded up the whole main street, like jewelry shops and everything, because people were coming to Long Beach and looting, and then we would get alerts on our phone that are like, mandatory curfew, stay inside, and I'm like, it's America.
Yeah.
So of course, as soon as I step out the front door, Long Beach PD goes cruising by.
Yeah,
and I waved at him.
What's amazing too is like up here when we had those marches. In fact, well, I won't talk about that on there, but with Eric and and there. But anyways, when we had those marches, you saw on the front of New York Times, you saw Coeur d'Alene, you saw all these people armed up around, downtown because there was. But what really happened too, you had a bunch of people that had something to prove. They came to town, they met up at Winco, and part of our militia up here met with them, the leaders, and they said, "Hey, here's the deal. We're going to march with you guys. We support your First Amendment right to protest. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to cause damage to our property. We're not going to hurt anybody. We're not going to trash anything. And you guys are going to go ahead and do your protest, and we're going to support it." And they actually walked with them on the outside. They let them do their thing, make their chants, said things that are inappropriate, did what they wanted to do, marched down Sherman Avenue. Nobody got hurt, no damage. And once it was done, they went home. It was amazing to watch two completely opposite ends of the spectrum walk together in solidarity, even though they completely disagreed with what was happening.
Yeah.
And that was never broadcasted.
Oh.
Nobody knew that.
Was that the same crew who has that battle bus? Have you seen the battle bus? It's like a murdered out school bus that the back is cut off, and then it's a platform, and there's like a side by side.
I haven't seen that.
It's the coolest freaking thing ever, dude. I'm like, whoever's running that.
Yeah.
It's rad.
It's amazing how
Sounds
stuff
like something
gets
I'd buy on
twisted.
Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah.
My wife would kill me. You bought what? A battle bus.
It's cool, man. Trust me. The guys are good. We're all going to have a good time.
It'd be a cool toy. Yeah, it's amazing how stuff gets twisted, though, because everybody looks at North Idaho, oh, they're supremacists, they're this. And I'm like, what's funny is that they actually supported the Constitution that day. They let people come out and get their message out.
Yeah.
And they did not allow them to do things that violate other people and violate laws. And the same people were here and in Spokane, and you look at the difference. What happened?
Yeah.
It's amazing because this town is so full of small mom and pop businesses, and I've seen it in cities in California where the rioters come through and they just trash it, and now these people are out of business because maybe they don't have insurance, whatever. And that did not happen here. Yeah. And I love that. The community was super supportive.
There were a lot of businesses in that area of Long Beach that went out of business because it was just too much.
Everything's gone. They're just not worth it to them.
It was crazy.
Pull up and leave.
Santa Monica, Long Beach, it all got looted.
That's crazy. Yeah, it was a different world up here.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah.
And you came up right at the tail end, but still it was completely different when you got
Totally different. And I went on a little motorcycle ride during that whole thing. And I remember I went through Boise and everyone was eating in a restaurant, and I sat down. I was like, this is wild.
Right.
Like what's going on here?
I know. That was so weird.
At the time,
man.
I'm like, I don't know enough about anything like to have an opinion one way or the other. All I knew is like, this is super crazy. Like it's
super normal.
Something.
Too.
Yeah. Especially living in California. It was, you're a product of your environment. And I think it's just so different. It's so different.
Right.
So I'm going to bring it back to the safe passage.
Yeah.
The resources what resources are available for people that don't know? How do they get in contact through you guys after talking to law enforcement? Like, what's the process look like?
Yeah. So for our team at the Children's Advocacy Center, obviously there's going to be an allegation at some point, whether like a kid discloses to a parent or to a school resource officer or their counselor. That's going to get forwarded to the Department of Health and Welfare and to law enforcement, and then they'll make a referral to us. And then once they come in, we can hook them up with all the resources we have. We do counseling. I raised a bunch of money so that we could give kids counseling at no cost. We just got a grant alongside Kootenai Health so we can do medical exams for these kids at no cost. So that's coming up. And then as far as safe passage goes from the domestic violence side, all they have to do is call 208-664-9303. That's our crisis line. And if you're in a domestic violence situation or your spouse beats you up or something, you call that number. They'll get you into a secure shelter and get you any resources you need. Kids, pets, anybody can come, and that's pretty much how that works. Sexual assault cases. So if a sexual assault happens and the victim shows up to Kootenai Health, they will automatically dispatch one of our on-call advocates. We have 24/7 advocates that show up to the hospital to work alongside the SANE nurses and then provide follow-up with them.
And you said it was a nonprofit. Is
Yes.
there any government funding, or how do you guys get money for this?
Yeah, so actually for our program, the CAC, we just got an amazing amount of funding from the state. So we work together as a group of CACs called the Idaho Network of Children's Advocacy Centers. And we approached the legislators and let them know that we need help with funding. We need to be funded. And here's the work that we do. Here are some of the convictions we've had that came out of the services we've provided. Here's some of the success stories. And the state of Idaho actually funded all the CACs across the state for the first time last year. We're hoping that that's repeated this coming year, which is looking pretty good. And then we do fundraisers on our own and just reaching out to private donors and things like that. So it's definitely kind of hard scrabble. I do a lot of fundraising. We do have someone who does fundraising with us. But yeah, and then there's some federal funding through the Victims of Crime Act. It's called VOCA. And those dollars are really restricted in what we can use them for. But we try to get a lot of private donations to help cover costs of things that aren't covered by VOCA.
If someone wants to make a donation, can they just go to the website and click a button?
It's safepassageid.org.
I will link that in the show notes. So you know what to do, people.
So when people come to you too, now obviously they can come to you directly if they want to.
Yes.
If they come to you directly and there is a crime involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously there likely is. What is the process for you guys? I'm guessing there's obviously mandated reporting, right?
Yep.
Are there situations where you don't report it, or it's just services provided, or is everything that comes to you gets reported, eventually finds its way to law enforcement and reports are taken? How does that work?
So for any child abuse case, so anybody under 18, there's mandated reporting. So we have to report that to law enforcement or health and welfare. The statute says, or I always encourage people to report to both just to cut out any confusion. For adult victims of crime, we don't necessarily report. Say a victim comes forward and says they've been a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault. We can do like a Jane Doe sex assault kit, and those stay on file with the state for quite a long time. So that way, if the victim decides they want to come forward, they can test the kit. But we don't, with adults, always report and coordinate with law enforcement just because we don't want to burn bridges with these victims.
Well, that's the reason why I ask, because a lot of people are afraid that things are going to get reported right away. And
sure.
We know that domestic violence survivors, for sure,
Yeah.
kids don't know better. That's why there's a mandated reporting.
Right.
You're trying to protect somebody that
Right.
doesn't have. But for somebody that's been in a very abusive domestic violence or relationship, they have fear of retribution.
Absolutely.
And, I was always taught as a cop, if there's no victim, there's no crime. Mm-hmm. So there needs to be somebody willing to come forward. And I think that is for a lot of people, that can be a process of decades,
Absolutely.
right? Before they come forward. So to know that people can come to you and say, I need help right now.
Yep.
I don't want this going anywhere. I have fear of these things, but I need a place to stay. I need to get my thoughts together. I think that's an awesome resource, because that is something that I've you know how it is. I mean, we had law enforcement try to hit, work on some human trafficking, but those people are also, they have fear. We can't talk to you. They'll shut the door on law enforcement.
They're hardcore.
I know. They'll shut the door on law enforcement when they're the victim, because they don't want any chance of getting abused, killed, hurt, relocate. I mean, it's just, they're just willing to go along with it. So that's good to know that people do not have to, as long as they're adults, have to have it reported.
Yeah. And the stat is it takes about 7 times of a DV happening for a woman to actually leave.
Wow.
Or not a woman, but anybody to actually leave a domestic violence situation.
Yeah.
And so, it can get frustrating for some cops. I think they're like, well, if you don't help me, I can't help you. And that's understandable. But at the same time, it's a long-term process. There's a lot of moving parts. And the fact that we can just say, hey, we've got a place for you to stay tonight. Here it is. You're safe. Here's a new cell phone.
That's
Whole 9 yards.
exactly what some people need.
Yep.
They just need somebody that they can trust, that they know that they could go to you and tell you stuff, and you're not going to run and exploit it.
Yep. It does get tricky when there's kids, though, because a lot of times like domestic violence and other types of abuse go hand in hand. So we have to walk a fine line on some cases. But usually by the time it makes it to us, it's been reported to law enforcement, so everybody's on the same page.
Right.
What, like how many cases a year are you guys dealing with? How many families are you helping a year? Do you have any stats on that?
Yeah. So we, on average, over the past 5 years since I've been in this role, it's about 250 kids a year that we do forensic interviews on. And so I would say about 90 to 95% of those are sexual abuse cases. And of those, the vast majority, and when I say vast majority, I want to say close to 75% are intrafamilial, meaning that it's a family member committing sexual abuse on another family member.
That's crazy.
So this is happening in family units, in homes. And those are the cases that are reported. Obviously, there's a dark figure that's unreported that we don't really know about, but those are the numbers that we're doing.
And that's just up here.
That's just up here.
And Idaho just became, stats-wise, the safest state in the country. So I'm curious how those numbers for what you guys do stack up with like Washington, for example.
Yeah, that's a good question. There is a children's advocacy center. It's called Partners with Families and Children in Spokane. I know they're very busy. They definitely have a bigger staff and a bigger building. I don't know what their statistics are, but I remember I was down in San Diego for a conference last year, and they mentioned that they do about 600 cases a year in San Diego, which seems a little low.
Yeah, for a big population.
Yeah.
Right. They're way bigger than
I
us.
think they've got 3 million people in that
Right.
area.
That does seem really low.
Yeah. And I think one of the challenges with it is they were charging law enforcement per forensic interview, so the agency would have to pay for the forensic interview, which I think would be kind of a turnoff to a lot of agencies. Whereas we don't charge anybody anything. They just show up and we help out.
What, for people that don't know, including myself actually, what is a forensic interview? When I hear forensics, I think you're like, there's body fluids involved or something like that.
No body
probably
fluids
not,
involved.
right? Okay.
Ideally, just tears, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So a forensic interview is basically a neutral fact-finding endeavor by a trained interviewer. So to be a forensic interviewer, you have to do training. You have to do peer review with other forensic interviewers at least twice a year. We do it more like on a monthly basis. And you're basically just sitting in there with a kid using a protocol it's called the Utah Children's Justice Center protocol, to ask them non-leading questions in a way that's not going to re-traumatize them. And then we're exploring allegations. So if a kid says, my dad hits me with a wooden spoon, right? We're gonna ask them open-ended questions. Tell me more about that. Trying to find out when it happened. Try to find out what the kid was feeling when it happened, emotionally and physically. And then we'll take a break halfway through, talk to law enforcement and health and welfare, and see what other questions that they might have. And then we'll go back in there and ask them more follow-up questions.
Is a wooden spoon a crime? Because my mom used to beat my ass with a wooden spoon when I was a child. I think that was pretty common.
Oh, dude, my dad had this red paddle.
Oh gosh, yeah.
He only whacked us with it once, and
that'll teach it.
Dude,
it was all good until it broke over my ass one time, and I laughed at my mom, and then I saw the daggers, and I was like, I'm out of trouble.
That is a good way. My pastor told us about. I never wanted to spank my kids. Then he actually talked about something in church about spanking your kids. And I went home and I spanked the crap out of him. I'm like, this is amazing. He's like, use an object. It teaches them to fear the object and not fear you. Huh. Right? It becomes a symbol. I know it sounds weird, but when you think about it, when people hit somebody, you associate that with it. And it worked really well with our kids because we got a wooden spoon. Actually, I used the paint stir sticks from Home Depot.
Oh, that probably stings a little bit. This is
terrible.
Terrible part of the conversation.
Yeah. And I would go get them my kids, and then he taught us like always separate yourself so you never spank them while you're in anger, right? So if they did something and they deserve a spanking, they go sit in a room for 5 minutes, and then you come in when you've been able to process and calm down. You're not emotional. And I started doing it with our kids, and I'll tell you what, it was amazing. I would come in, they'd do something, I'd go get the stick. They'd go get it. They'd go sit in the room 5 minutes. I would be like, I'm so mad right now. Let me calm down. I'd calm down. I'd walk in there. I'd talk to him, be like, Do you understand what you did? Yeah, cool. I'd spank them. They'd cry. We'd sit there and give each other a hug. I'd sit there and pray with them. We'd talk about how not to do it again. And it always ended up positive. My kids, I remember they see and they're like, I remember that, but they didn't fear me. And so it's funny because objects can be looked like that. But when we did that with our kids, man, it was actually a very good disciplinary tool. And it opened communication to us. My daughter would have conversations with me. I know what I did. And we'd talk about it. We'd pray about it. And it was crazy how well it worked.
Yeah. All I remember is my dad's red paddle, and that's it. It only took one time.
I mean,
I was definitely praying during that. I was like,
your kids are well behaved, right? We were tough on our kids when they were young too, and I've definitely spanked them, but now I don't have to. Like my kids.
My son is well behaved. He saw me spank my daughter and goes,
Your daughter. Your daughter's sweet as
Not
can
doing
be
that.
to me.
my daughter challenged it. She's like, I can do more. I can do more. I'm like, my son's like, I'm never even. Nope.
well, I had three brothers, and we were all about a year apart.
Oh my goodness, your poor mother.
And the day of the incident in question, we learned, funny enough, in Sunday school about the crucifixion. So we decided to reenact that in our yard. But we didn't have a cross, so we go, we just put together a little gallows. We literally tied a rope around we were little, tied a rope around my brother's neck and didn't push him off of anything, but tied it to a thing, and he got rope burn on his neck. And
Yeah, that's
Oh my
that's
gosh.
spank worthy.
my mom freaked out, justifiably so. And then my dad took us to Builder's Emporium at the time and said, picked out a nice piece of plywood, spray painted. It was an all-day thing. Spray painted it.
Wow.
That's a long build.
Watched it dry.
But see, look, he wasn't angry by the time he
No,
spanked
I don't
you
think
guys.
he was, but I remember it. And then it was in our garage, and so it was always there.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. It worked. It worked for me.
Yeah. Well,
I would never encourage that, but like, hey, I don't know.
Well, because you see the dirty side of it where people are using things to
Too
hurt
far.
people
Oh,
out,
yeah.
out
Oh,
of
yeah.
anger too.
All
Like,
the time.
It
All
is
the
a
time.
totally different experience when you spank your kid when you're angry versus when you let things settle for
I
a
bet.
bit.
Yeah.
I hated it.
Yeah. And there's the kids that we see, we're not talking about like little, reasonable physical discipline, which is obviously legal. I'm talking about kids that are really,
It is
thrashed.
things that normal people cannot even imagine exist.
Yeah.
It's that bad. I know.
burns,
Yeah.
a lot of really, really bad stuff.
Like torture.
Yeah, we've got, I think last year we did about 5 really heavy child torture cases, a lot of cases involving abusive head trauma where the kids have brain bleeds, child deaths in some cases.
How do you not want to strangle the suspect in those cases? Because that would be hard. You don't have to answer that because you're still in the job, but that would be a hard one for me.
I don't ever see them.
Okay, because
But as a cop, I dealt with a lot of bad dudes doing bad stuff.
I had one incident as a cop where I lost my shit, and it was
you lose your cool.
It was Halloween night.
Yeah.
This guy was driving drunk. He had he knew the door in his passenger side door did not work in the truck and would open up occasionally. And he put his little 6-year-old daughter in a car seat, did not buckle the car seat, took a turn, the door flew open, she flew out on the street. She survived, but she was in bad shape when we got there. Ugh. And then he started chipping at me, and I may have instigated it. And I fucking felt real good about it after, let me tell you.
Yeah.
He went to jail and he was hurt too.
Yeah, that happens. I mean, fortunately, I don't have to be around them, and I don't get to meet them afterwards. I mean, I've gone to court. We have a facility dog named Lucy. She's a little black lab, and she sits there and cuddles the kids, and during forensic interviews, and then I take her to court so she can provide moral support while they're sitting in court. But those few times, you see them there, and it's
it's
tough.
crazy. It's crazy too because they will just hold these kids in purgatory for years. I think you think of like a young mother that gives up her child. We had one of those safe drops in our fire station down in California. And I think we'd probably get like 2 a year where somebody come in and they'd be like, I need to give up my kid, right? And so many people have looked down on that and be like, I can't believe you're going to give up your kid. You're going to do this. We're like, hold on, you know what? Other people will just hold on to their children and abuse them as long as it becomes some sort of sociopathic, just
Yeah.
absolutely terrifying thing for the children, as opposed to letting them go and have somebody that actually cares for them.
That just made me think. I just saw this the other day. So in effective July 1st, 2025, Idaho has authorized capital punishment for child sex crimes. So you can get the death penalty in Idaho if it's aggravated lewd contact with a child 12 or younger. I'm all for that.
I'm all for it, and I wish it had more teeth.
Yep.
Because I think that is unfortunately one of the first things I did when that law got passed. I called one of the prosecutors we work with, and I was like, "Hey,
let's get one.
We're doing death penalty cases now, huh?" Unfortunately, it's more symbolic than anything. I think that oops, I'm going to make Austin mad. Touch my mic. I think that there's some kind of constitutional challenge with applying the death penalty to someone who didn't kill another human. And so I think on the constitutional level, it's going to take a judge in Idaho to actually hand that down. And then that's probably going to have to go in front of the Supreme Court.
That'll get fought for 30 years.
Yeah, before they can actually put someone on the bench and
There's a strong argument to somebody that has been killed not having to suffer the way that some of these kids are going to have to suffer the rest of their life.
Yep.
You didn't just take a life away. You have created something that is almost an impasse and going to be something held over that person's head for years.
Yeah. And potentially, I mean, those cases unfortunately tend to travel down, right? Someone that's a victim tends to be do the same thing to someone else down the road, right?
Sometimes.
That's fairly common, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from one of the big things is maternal support. So if we have a mom, for whatever reason, the research has shown that it's the mother. If the mother supports the child after they make that allegation, then the child has a really good chance of recovering and just being a totally normal person. Like I always tell families, like, this isn't a death sentence. This isn't the end of this kid's life. This isn't the end of your life. And that's why we try to provide those medical exams and tell them, like, your body's going to be okay. Because there's so many misconceptions about sexual abuse. We have girls that have this huge feeling of guilt, and they say that they're no longer intact. I've heard men tell their daughters or tell me, I'm worried that she's no longer intact. And I'm like, that's not really going to help any of the situation out. I guess long story short is, like, proving to that kid that this happened to you, this doesn't define you. And if they have support from their mom and their dad, ideally both, but particularly mom, it usually works out pretty well for them.
Yeah. And
depending on the severity of it, of course.
And it is, you see the breakdown of the family unit in the U.S.
Yeah.
Like constantly. And
sure.
you see this lack of commitment between spouses, where a lot of kids are coming from broken homes, and to the parents, it's very hard to be a single parent. Doesn't matter if you're the one that the kid loves or the one the kid runs from or anything else. It's very hard to be in those situations. You're constantly compared. I know I came from a broken family, and I think any kid that does naturally will, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to go to the other one, right? You don't have that supported family unit. And when that happens, you see more tendencies for abuse. You see more stress on the family unit, on the parents. I mean, being a single parent, I look at dads, moms, it doesn't matter. When you're a single parent, you have to take care of 1, 2, 3 kids.
That's crazy.
There's
That's
no
crazy.
Yeah. There is no relief for that. There's no relief.
And we see women come to our shelter with multiple kids, all by themselves, just having been, having their whole world turned upside down. And I'm impressed. I have one son, one boy, and it's a full-time job.
Yeah.
He's really active. And he had colic, and
we were there, brother.
It's been I've aged about 10 years in the past 2.5 years, I think.
Yeah. How old is he?
2.5.
Oh man. So you're in it.
I'm in it.
Yeah. Good for you.
And I can't imagine being a single parent. I can't imagine it.
No, especially
It's
with
so-
really young kids.
Yeah, it's so challenging.
And
Extremely.
truthfully, you look at like how much stay-at-home moms who don't get enough credit.
Oh, they're epic.
I know, but
They're
they a
epic.
lot of times they are a single parent for 8 hours a day,
It's
10 hours a
so-
day.
Well,
So
especially
impressive.
for when your husband's a first responder
Oh, gosh.
and you're gone for 8 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or
8
you're working
days.
graveyards. And my kids both of them had colic and
Yeah.
cried 24
Oh
hours
my
a day.
gosh.
And I'd have to leave. I'd come home from graveyards. I'm exhausted. My wife's like been up all night. She's exhausted. And then there's always this dynamic of like, all right, who's going to get to sleep first?
Dude,
She was a saint. It was tough.
you're not selling me on having another one. But I'm 42. I think
It's like dogs, man. If you got one, you might as well have two.
Oh
honestly.
my gosh.
Now 4, I don't know. That's a whole other game. But yeah, 2's manageable.
Yeah, but back to what you're saying, we do see a lot of divorce in our cases. A lot. These guys, I say guys, there are a few women that are engaging in sexual abuse, but primarily like a male sexual predator. They're looking for somebody that they can take advantage of. Somebody that's disconnected, somebody that's vulnerable. Mom and dad are going through something, or they're too busy to be in their life, or this, that, or the other, or they won't care.
Yeah.
And they're looking for these like throwaway kids, and they're really good at finding them, because a lot of the especially young girls that we talk to that end up in human trafficking cases where they're we've had some cases where kids leave our state and end up on FIG in Southern California and LA and street walking, and a lot of those kids have been victimized multiple times because these predators, these guys know what they're looking for, and they pick up on it and they do it again.
Yeah. We were designed so differently. I did a marriage counseling book one time called Love and Respect.
Mm-hmm.
There's 3 big things that come out of it, right? And we need to get back to it. Just as a country, as families, we have to get back to this because we lose it. Men are built, they want to feel respected.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
love is not what men are looking for. They're looking for respect. And there's a way that women provide that respect to a husband. And then it allows the husband to provide for his wife and which really women look to be loved. You have to if your wife does not feel loved, then you're not filling that tank. And
sure.
when a man's not respected and a woman's not loved, they have a tendency to have an empty cup and they look other places, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then for kids, don't argue in front of your kids. I don't know how many times I've looked at my wife and I'm like, she says something, I'm like, no, I disagree with it,
Not
right?
right now.
And it turns into one of these like, and then we're in the other room and I'm like, what?
Yeah,
And then it's
yeah.
like, I don't care. She can argue with me. She has her voice and I want her to have it. But I don't do that in front of the kids.
Yeah.
And kids will treat their spouses the way that you do. If you're that man that always argues with your wife and never gives her a voice and doesn't show her love, your son has a tendency to want to do that. And your daughter has a tendency to expect that. And if your wife is not showing you respect as a husband, then your son learns that maybe they're not going to get that. And the daughter learns not to provide that.
Yeah.
Like we have to get back to those big 3 things. And putting those things into a relationship, if you can instill those into a relationship, I feel like these problems naturally go away.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. And I think, I don't know what I forget who said it. It's a pretty famous quote. Maybe
Teddy
you guys
Roosevelt.
can Google it.
Just go with that.
Possibly. Yeah, Teddy Roosevelt. My son's name's Teddy. So anyways, Teddy Roosevelt once said that if you want to change the world, start with your own household, right? Like focus on your family.
That's
focus
probably
on your
Gandhi.
kids.
That
Probably
sounds like a Gandhi quote.
Yeah, maybe Mother Teresa.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a big proponent of that because a lot of the crap that we see and the stuff I saw as a cop, it's like if people have intact families and loving parents, they're not going to go out and do all this wacky stuff.
We need to make families great again. I think there's been a push over the last, I don't know how many decades to dissolve the nuclear family. And I like, it's incredibly important to have that.
Yeah.
Just that bond, man.
Yep.
It's hard, man. It's values are realigning and lifestyles change and everything else. And there becomes a lot of tension on, there's a lot of aggression out there towards nuclear families, towards men being men, women being women, honestly.
Politics has ruined a lot of that. I've got family members, cousins that have disowned me because I was a cop and they just felt like all cops are bad.
Yeah.
Right. And it
That
sucks,
man.
It sucks.
That
And I'm like,
sucks.
you guys you're not looking, like, look past that. And you grew up with me. You know me. Come on.
Yeah.
I'm not any different.
Yeah.
It's a struggle. Question. Are drugs involved in a lot of these cases that you're dealing with?
Yeah, they are. I think a lot of cases that we work, we've worked a lot. There's been a lot of fentanyl cases.
Yeah.
Eric's
ears perked up wherever he's at out there. Eric loves talking about fentanyl.
Yeah, they're starting to come up. These the Maxis and I was talking to an investigator down in the Nez Perce tribe, and there's people that are smoking like 50 of these things a day. 50. And how do you?
Wow.
And I worked a case with a little boy whose dad was smoking Maxis and decided to run head on to a truck. Luckily, everybody survived. Injured pretty severely, but the kid was in the car, and a 2-year-old got ejected. And
oh my gosh!
But because he was hooked on fentanyl. But yeah, a pretty classic combination of alcohol, drugs.
But I mean, this is a crime that goes across all demographics, huh?
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Child sexual abuse, primarily, pretty much all demographics. The psychology of a child sexual abuser, these guys are really smart. They are very calculating in the things that they do. They're really good liars. So we hosted a training not too long ago with a gal who was in charge of sex offender recovery in Oregon. And part of that was doing pre-sentence investigations, post-sentence investigations. And they would polygraph these guys over and over again to see if their stories changed. And one thing that they found is that their stories changed a lot. And one thing that they brought up to gain sympathy was saying, oh, I was sexually abused as a child, so that's why I'm doing it. And then that was like 65% of them said that. And then they polygraphed them again, and it went down to about 30%. And then they polygraphed them again, and it went down to like 5%. So they're very manipulative in the fact that they typically groom kids. So they're getting in their heads. They're selecting a victim. Then they're getting in their heads, and not only do they groom the kids, but they groom the family. And they let the family and the surroundings know that, oh, I'm a good guy. I'm a good person. I would never hurt a kid. And, here's a gift, or I'll give your kid a ride to this thing. And then they isolate the kid from the family, and then they start doing what they do. And then they engage in secrecy. And whether that's, we've had cases of physical threats. If you tell anybody, I'll kill your family, I'll kill you, I'll kill your dog. We've had guys actually, kill dogs in front of kids.
Wow.
Their pets, things like that. Skin animals in front of them.
God.
And so, so they do that. It's crazy. These guys are nuts. Like a lot of psychopathy, sociopathic tendencies, and they're really bad. But it goes across all demographic groups.
I don't even know. Say Idaho stepped up and started executing some of these people. I don't know if it would even be enough of a deterrent to stop people from doing it. Like, I feel like it's such a part of their psychology. Yeah. They're going to find a way. They'll just be sneakier. Yeah,
and I think that people, they have an ingrained sexual preference, and it doesn't change. Like, you look at actual, a lot of states classify certain sex offenders as SVPs, sexually violent predators, and they continue to do the same thing over and over again. It's wild. It's wild.
What's the online the map? Is it Megan's Law?
Yeah, Megan's Law.
You can look at the map and see. Like, every time I move somewhere, I pull it up.
Well, it's littered. It's not like you can't even get away with it. Get away from it.
Oh, they're everywhere. Yeah. When we lived downtown, I pulled it up and all over downtown Coeur d'Alene. You know what I mean? And I pulled up, the SVPs specifically, and I showed them to my kids. I'm like, hey, if you see this guy, you walk away. Not like crime in Coeur d'Alene is super chill, so don't worry about that. But never any issues. But I think it's important to be aware and have those conversations with your kids at a young age. Yeah. It's a hard conversation, but as a cop, I've been having hard conversations with my kids since they were very little about drugs, about car crashes, whatever. Like, they grew up early and quick, and I think that's important. A lot of people shy away from that. They're like, I don't want to taint their childhood or whatever. I'm like, trust me, the alternative is much worse than informing them.
They need to know. If people need to tell their kids there are creepy people out there that will do creepy things to you, and don't let anybody touch your body parts.
Right.
And tell them the names of their body parts. So many people are just like, oh, my, hoo-ha, and this, that, and the other. It's like, have real conversations with your kids and tell them never, under any circumstance, should anybody be anywhere near you like this.
Right.
If an adult wants to be alone with you or pressure you to be alone, no, it's not happening.
I have scared the living shit out of my kids about fentanyl because we didn't have to deal with that when we were kids, right?
No.
I'd go to parties and, there were people using recreational drugs and it was fentanyl wasn't even on the radar back then.
There wasn't a specter of death hovering over every.
Yeah. I'm glad I didn't grow up right now because that's terrifying. I tell my kids, I'm like, do not ever, like one pill could be the end.
Has anybody started lacing marijuana with fentanyl?
Not that I've heard. I wish I heard.
Because it's not that far off. I mean,
right.
Things like that will happen. I mean, they've destroyed every natural drug out there. Not that I ever did drugs. I'm just saying. We've talked about this before. You can't do cocaine or heroin anymore.
You're judging me right now.
Because none of it's even pure, right? Like
No.
you don't know what you're getting. So, I mean, I would be surprised when they start mixing stuff like that just to make it a little bit better.
Probably
a little bit of a kick.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Because it's going to start in a small portion of the store, right? Become a little more popular. And then next thing you know, fuck.
I've got my kids freaked out on finding money on the ground, right? I mean, people wrap dope up in money, and now that residue is on the dollar bill that you just found at the gas station. Actually, I had a dream about that the other day. That's weird.
I found a 20 the other day, and I didn't step over it.
Just rub it all over your face and inhale whatever.
Put it right in my pocket. Take it home.
I get freaked out about opening letters, not because of like anthrax or anything, but I don't know how inappropriate I could tell a story.
You can go send it.
So there was a parolee we arrested when I was a cop, and he goes, "Yeah, I send the governor a shillelogram like every."
I already know what that is. I've never even looked it up. I already know what it is.
Every week.
I can guess.
He would get some butter from the mess hall and rub it all over his dick, and then fold his dick on a piece of paper, and then let it dry and write a letter to the governor.
Shillelogram.
Send it to whoever. What was it, Dave? I don't know. One in California. He sent him shillelograms. So, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm a little nervous to open letters. I'm always looking at them like, does this come from a correctional?
Hey, Dave, can you open this? That's what I do. Yeah.
That's funny. No, this is really cool. And I think that, like I said, these types of programs have to exist. I think it's important. And like I said, I think the best thing about your program, especially is for the adults, of like, you can call us and it doesn't have to go anywhere else. But hopefully you're going to give them the right advice. I'm sure you will. And I think that's just, that's something that people need to know. That there are genuinely people out there that are not cops, that are free, that are available, and they really are just there to be advocates for you.
Definitely.
Right? Just to be a friend. When everybody else, you feel embarrassed, you can keep things quiet. You can talk to somebody and get some good advice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for coming on and talking about this. I'll link the resources on there. So if people want to donate to a great cause, jump on there and hit that donate button.